Everybody who hates the way The Mentalist ended will tell you the same thing. The show picked the wrong guy to be Red John, because after 6 seasons of build-up, a body count in the dozens, a network of dirty cops running through local, state, and federal law enforcement, it was all settled in about 40 minutes and turned out to be a man that shouldn't even be that hard to beat. It almost feels like the build-up didn't pay off, but that's not the only issue. So today we are going over how The Mentalist ruined Red John in a single episode, and just how big that was for the entire show. First of all, you can't say a single episode ruined a villain until you're actually clear on what that villain was, and Red John was never just one thing. He was a pile of promises that the show kept adding to every single year. Every season found some new way to tell you this guy was bigger than you thought, and by the end, that pile is enormous. So it's worth going through what the show actually told us about him, because the list is way longer than most people remember. It starts in the very first episode. Jane is out there working as a fake psychic, and he publicly mocks Red John, calling him an unimpressive, lonely little man. Red John's answer is to go to Jane's house, kill his wife Angela and his daughter Charlotte, and leave his smiley face behind. That's the setup for the entire show.
Psychic instead of a dishonest little worm, you wouldn't need to open the door.
And look at what it already tells you about him. This is a killer who watches, who takes things personally, and who will end your whole life over one sentence you said about him in public. Then, the show starts stacking. In Season 2, a woman named Rebecca Anderson attacks Bosco's team, killing members of the unit and leaving Bosco himself dying. She wasn't some outsider who kicked a door in. She was Red John's, and she got close enough to gut the exact unit that was hunting him. And before anyone can get a single useful thing out of her, she's poisoned. So now Red John isn't just a killer, he's a killer whose people can reach inside the building that's supposed to be catching him. Later that same season, Jane gets grabbed by a group of copycat killers. Red John shows up in a mask and black clothes, gets Jane out of there, and recites part of a William Blake poem while he's doing it. Christina Fry gets taken that same night. When Christina shows up again, she's alive, but she's completely convinced that she's dead. She talks like a person who already died. He didn't kill her, he just went into her head, moved the furniture around, and handed her back broken. And that's not even the part that scared people the most. What really got fans was the loyalty. Rebecca got poisoned before she could give anyone a name.
Red John, or someone who worked for him, snuck into the CBI and poisoned Rebecca.
Lorelei Martin slept with Jane and tried to recruit him because Red John wanted her to. Timothy Carter sat across from Jane in a public food court and sold the idea that he was Red John so completely that Jane shot him for it. These are people who threw their entire lives away for him, and for most of them, the show never shows you what he was offering or what he was holding over them. The one time it does show you the machinery, it's genuinely nasty. Because he had Lorelei's sister murdered and then kept her working for him afterward like nothing happened. His personal kill count sits at least 41, and that number doesn't include everyone who died because he asked somebody else to handle it. Now here's why all of that matters more than people realize. Every single thing on that list is a different promise, not the same promise repeated 5 times. Rebecca promises you a man with access to anything. The mask and the poem promise you a man who performs, who enjoys the theater of it, who genuinely thinks he's making art. Christina promises you a man who can rewire a person's brain. The followers promise you a man with the kind of pull that gets people to die for him without ever asking why. And the smiley face on the wall promises you a man who wants credit. That's 5 completely separate ideas about who this person is, and the show never picks one. It just keeps piling them on top of each other year after year, because every season needs a new reason for you to be afraid. Which means that when the finale finally puts a real human face on him, that one face has to explain all 5 of those things at the same time. That's the build the show ran up over 6 seasons. And when it finally came due, the guy who paid it was someone most people had completely forgotten was ever on the show.
You're Red John.
So let's talk about Thomas McAllister, and let's be fair to him first, because the criticism most people throw at this guy is the wrong one. The complaint you hear constantly is that a county sheriff is too boring to be Red John, That's actually the weakest version of the argument, and there are fans who make a really good case for the opposite. A guy like Brett Stiles is obviously a genius cult leader with money and charisma, which makes him a fun villain and a terrible hidden serial killer, because the whole point of a hidden serial killer is that nobody looks at him twice. A boring sheriff in wine country is exactly the kind of person who could do this for 20 years without anyone checking. On paper, the pick works. The problem isn't who he is. The problem is how little of him we ever got to see. McAllister shows up in Season 1, Episode 2 in Napa, working a case alongside the team. He comes off as a completely unremarkable local official, and he keeps losing at rock, paper, scissors to Jane over and over again.
You know rock, paper, scissors? I do. Play me.
And notice how early that is. That's the second episode of the entire series, which means the man who killed Jane's family is standing in a room with him before most viewers have even settled into the show. On paper, that should be one of the best long games any television series has ever played. It isn't, because then he leaves and he's just gone. He's not lurking in the background of scenes for 5 seasons. He's not popping up once a year so you can feel him watching. He disappears completely and doesn't come back until Season 6, by which point most people watching had no memory of him at all. Compare that to Timothy Carter in Season 3, Episode 24. Carter had barely any screen time either, but look at what he did with it. He sat down across from Jane in a food court and started saying private things about Angela and Charlotte that nobody outside that house could possibly know. He convinced Jane in real time, right in front of us, using nothing but words. That's why people bought it. That's why Jane shot him. Carter earned the reveal in about 6 minutes. McAllister comes back in Season 6 as a name on a list. Then, by the time Jane gets all the surviving suspects into his house and makes them pull their shirts down, the thing that supposedly settles it is a tattoo on his shoulder. 3 dots, and Gail Bertram and Reed Smith are sitting in that same room with the exact same mark on them. And that tattoo doesn't even say he's Red John. It says he's in the Blake Association, same as the other 2. So the biggest piece of physical evidence in a 6-year manhunt is a symbol shared by 3 different suspects. And this is where the difference between surprise and impact really shows up. A twist can be genuinely surprising and still land like absolutely nothing. Surprise is just about information you didn't have. Impact comes from the moments you get to go back and rewatch with new eyes, where suddenly a line means something completely different. That's why good twists feel like the show was talking to you the whole time. McAllister barely has any of those moments. He's got one, and fans genuinely love it, which is the rock, paper, scissors thing. Red John can beat you with money and dirty cops and 100 favors owed, but he cannot beat Patrick Jane at reading a human face, and he couldn't do it in his very first scene either. That's a great detail. That's one great detail carrying 6 years of build-up on its back. And that's the thing fans keep circling back to. The loudest complaint isn't that the sheriff was too normal, it's that nothing about him explains the devotion. This is supposed to be the man people killed for, died for, and lied to federal agents for. Watch every second of screen time he has before Season 6, and try to find the version of him that makes any of that make sense. It isn't there. Which is why the replacement lists exist. Ask any room of fans who it should have been, and Brett Stiles comes up first almost every time, because he already had the charisma, the followers, the money, and the cult. After that, people throw out Brett Partridge, Bertram, Carter, even Virgil Minnelli, and some go all the way to members of Jane's own team. None of those are officially right. What they tell you is that people spent 6 years building a picture in their heads, and the show handed them someone who didn't match it. So the reveal ends up being technically clean and emotionally flat. You can't call it cheating because he was there, and he was on the list, and Lorelai's clue about the handshake genuinely points at him. It just doesn't hit, because there's nothing behind it to hit with. A thin backstory on its own doesn't sink a villain, because plenty of them turn up late and still work fine. What sinks this one is what happens the second you start asking the episode basic questions. Now we get to the actual damage, and it has almost nothing to do with casting. Go back to Season 5, Episode 22. This is the episode where Jane finally finishes his list. 7 names.
I have a list of 7 names.
That's great. It's amazing. Tell me the names.
Brett Stiles, Gail Bertram, Ray Hafner, Reed Smith, Robert Kirkland, Thomas McAllister, Brett Partridge. 7 men Jane shook hands with, pulled from Lorelai's clue, and it took him years of work to get there. It's the biggest step forward the investigation ever takes. And then Red John sends him a recording. It's Lorelai, reading those exact 7 names. The same 7. In a recording that looks like it was made before Jane even finished putting the list together. That is, without question, the single most terrifying thing Red John ever does on this show. Everything else he did could be explained by having people on the inside. This one can't because the list was in Jane's head. The show never explains it. Not once, not ever. When Jane finally has him in that chapel, McAllister's answer is that he's a real psychic. That's the explanation. On a program that spent 6 years every single week proving that every psychic who has ever lived is a con artist running a cold reading. Jane's entire character is built on that idea. The show hands you an answer it has already spent its whole run telling you is a lie, and then moves on.
I knew because I am real psychic. I want you to blink once for no, and twice for...
There's a small group of fans who take him at his word on that, and say the reason the show can't explain his foreknowledge is that there's nothing to explain. Most people reject it for the obvious reason. This is a show where every psychic gets exposed as a liar within about 11 minutes, and letting one be real in the final act would break the rules the whole series ran on. So fans have tried to patch it themselves instead. One popular guess is that Lorelai read out a much longer list of names at some point, and Red John just cut the footage down once he knew Jane's final 7. Another is that the Blake Association got hold of Jane's research and narrowed it to the same people independently. Both of those are decent theories. Both of them are things fans came up with, not things the show ever said. And it's not just the recording. In the episode before the finale, Reed Smith sits down and explains how the Blake Association actually works, which is that members do favors when they're asked and get protection in return. That's a solid answer for how Red John had reach. The problem is, the finale never traces a single one of his old wins back to a specific person who pulled it off. Who poisoned Rebecca Anderson before she could talk? Who covered for Timothy Carter? Who killed Lorelai before she could say the name out loud? The one time you actually watch the machine work is Reed Smith killing Robert Kirkland and getting protected for it, and that happens 2 episodes from the end, on a guy we barely knew. And this had already happened once before, which makes it worse. The whole Timothy Carter thing was a fake ending built on purpose, with a man who knew things about Jane's dead family and was ready to die selling it. Somebody set that up. Somebody fed Carter that information and got him ready to sit in that food court. The finale never says who or how or what it costs. Season 6 opens on the same problem. Red John takes Lisbon, paints his smiley face on her face, and then lets her go. That's the closest he ever gets to the person Jane cares about most, and he walks away. Why? The show doesn't say. It's another huge move by a character we're never given the inside of. And then there's everything about the man himself. Why he started killing is never explained. Why he calls himself Red John is never explained. When he built the association, how he got the first members to sign up, what he actually wanted out of any of this, none of it exists anywhere in 7 seasons of television. You can watch the entire series and come away knowing more about Lorelai's dead sister than you know about Red John's actual life. Here's why that gap is the thing that actually breaks it. The Blake Association is a genuinely great answer to how did he have that much reach. It is not an answer to who is this man. A network explains a machine, it cannot explain a person. And honestly, the machine was the part fans were already fine with because a corrupt system covering for a killer is believable and kind of chilling. Nobody was confused about how he got away with it. People were confused about how a sheriff from Napa became someone people were willing to die for.
Point to you, but I'm just a humble foot soldier in the Blake Association. Red John is one of the top brass.
Now, there are people who watch that exact same episode and think the empty space is the best thing about it, not sloppy writing the whole point. And the scene they used to prove it is the one everybody else uses to make fun of it. So let's make that case properly, because it's a real one. The argument goes like this: the show didn't fumble Red John. It took him apart on purpose, piece by piece, right in front of you, and everything you think is a failure is actually the episode doing exactly what it meant to do. And the defense has a decent opening card, which is the fake death. In Season 6, Episode 6, Jane gets every surviving suspect into his own house and makes them show their shoulders. Then, the place blows up, Ray Hafner and Brett Stiles die in it, Jane barely survives, and everyone comes away believing McAllister died too. He didn't. He walked out of a burning building, let the entire state file him under dead, and used the free run to have Bertram set up as the guy. That is a real move by a real operator, and it happens 2 episodes before people started calling him a paper tiger. Then look at what he actually does in that chapel. Nothing. He does not do one single thing himself. Oscar Cordero is the one who searches Jane, takes the gun he can find off him, walks him inside, and holds the room. Cordero is the one who shoots Gail Bertram. And he only does that because McAllister ordered it, and the only reason to order it is that the police and the public already believed Bertram was Red John. So the mastermind's big power move in his own reveal episode is having another guy shoot a guy for him. His entire personal contribution is talking. He says he's psychic. He says he's the one who told Jane about the list in the first place. He says he won. And his proof that he won is that Jane's the one whose life got destroyed. None of that is a mastermind walking you through the plan. It's a man doing damage control with his mouth because there's nothing left in his hands. And then Jane puts breadcrumbs in his hand and lets a pigeon out of his coat. The bird wasn't random either. Back in Season 6, Episode 3, Jane hauled the whole team up to Napa specifically to get a look at McAllister, and while he was standing there, he watched the man react to a bird with real fear. He clocked it and filed it away for months.
Hey, give it that!
So when the pigeon comes out and the leader of a nationwide criminal network completely comes apart over a few feathers, that's not a writer running out of ideas. That's setup paying off. Jane gets to a second gun he'd hidden on himself before he ever walked in, shoots Cordero, and puts a bullet in McAllister. McAllister runs, then he bargains, offering to explain absolutely everything if Jane just lets him live. Give that reading full credit because a lot of it is right. Every single thing that made Red John frightening was borrowed from somewhere else. The anonymity, the followers, the dirty cops, and the theater of it. That only worked while nobody could see his face. Strip all of that away, and what's underneath is a scared, middle-aged man in a church trying to trade information for another year of breathing. Fans who love this ending will tell you that Red John was never Jane's equal. He was just better connected. And the finale finally proves it. Even the pigeon complaint falls apart when you poke it. People ask how Cordero missed a live bird when he searched Jane. Cordero was looking for a weapon, running his hands over a man hunting for something hard, not a soft, warm bundle under a coat. Stage magicians hide birds on their bodies, that's an old trick. Jane beats him with the exact skill set Jane has always had, which is the whole reason the character exists in the first place. And the last beat of that fight is the one people argue about hardest. When Jane asks him straight out if he's scared to die, McAllister can't even get a word out, so he blinks. That's it. That's the answer.
You afraid to die?
For people who love this ending, that blink is the whole thing finally finished, the moment the monster admits he's just a man who doesn't want to stop breathing. For people who hate it, it's a villain who ran a nationwide network for years, folding completely in about 90 seconds, and the speed of it is exactly the problem. There's one more detail the defenders love, and it's a good one. Jane walked into that chapel carrying a bird and a hidden gun at a moment when the entire show, the police, and the audience were all pointing at Bertram. You don't bring a pigeon to meet a man you think is Bertram. Jane never believed McAllister died in that explosion, and he'd already picked his weapon. But here's the line that reading can't cross. Showing that a myth was inflated only works if the show also shows you who inflated it and why. A balloon going flat is not a character arc. You need to have met the person holding the pump. Red John turning out to be a coward underneath is a fantastic final beat, and it's sitting on top of a first act that nobody ever wrote. The deflation lands emotionally and leaves you with nothing to think about afterward, because there's no man there to think about. Both sides are holding a real piece of this. The people who love the ending are right about what that scene does, and the people who hate it are right about what it skips. But neither side is arguing about the moment that actually locks the door on this story for good. That one comes 5 minutes later, with Red John bleeding on the ground and offering Jane every answer he ever wanted.
Please don't kill me. Let me live. Please. Let me live.
The last door on the Red John story doesn't get closed by a writer. Patrick Jane closes it himself deliberately in Season 6, Episode 8, and everyone remembers the kill and forgets what he turned down to get it. McAllister is shot. He's been running through public streets with a bullet in him and Jane behind him the whole way, and Jane finally catches him next to a pond. He's on the ground, he can barely move, and he is selling as hard as he can. He'll explain his methods. He'll tell Jane how he did all of it. Every question this show spent 6 seasons refusing to answer is sitting right there in that man's throat, and he is desperate to hand it over, because it's the only thing he's got left to trade with. Jane doesn't want it. He asks 2 things. Does he regret killing Angela and Charlotte, and is he afraid to die? McAllister answers by blinking. Then Jane puts his hand over the man's mouth and holds it there and feels him stop. And there's something almost neat about how that closes the circle. The first weapon Jane ever used on this guy was embarrassment. Standing there, calling him small and lonely and sad in front of an audience. It cost him his family. 6 years later, he does the exact same thing again, except this time he takes the gun, the bodyguard, the mystery, and the dignity first, and makes the man admit he's scared before he goes. The price for it was never just Jane's, either. Lisbon spent the back half of that season being dragged through his plan. She got taken by Red John and left alive with his mark painted on her. She got handcuffed and left outside her own crime scene, while Jane locked 7 suspects in his house. And when he went to the chapel, she was still trying to reach him, still trying to get there before he did something he couldn't come back from. She didn't make it in time, and Jane never really wanted her to. After that, he runs. He's a fugitive for 2 years, and when the show comes back, it's a different show entirely. The CBI has been shut down. It's the FBI now with new people and new cases, and Red John comes up about as often as an old file nobody wants to reopen. Jane gets a life out of it. He comes back to actual police work, he ends up with Lisbon, and he stops being the guy who is only alive to catch someone. Which is a happy ending for him and a strange one for everybody who spent 6 years watching the mystery, because the show moves on from Red John a lot faster than the audience did. For Jane, this is the only ending that was ever going to happen, and the show is honest about that. Look at where he started and where he finished. He came in as a con man who talked his way around the rules, and he goes out killing a wounded man with his bare hands next to a pond. He never wanted a case file, or a confession on tape, or a trial, or his name in a newspaper. He wanted the man who did it to be scared, and then he wanted him gone. Fans who defend this scene are completely right that it refuses the cheap version, the one where the hero lowers the gun and decides killing would make him just as bad. Jane kills him on purpose while looking at him, and the show lets him have it, even though it costs him 2 years of his life on the run.
I'm just savoring the moment.
But that's also the exact second the audience gets locked out of the room. Every unanswered thing in this entire series dies in that man's throat, and the show knows it and does it anyway. The recording of Laurelie reading the list, where the name Red John came from, why he started, how he built the association and got that many cops to owe him favors, why he let Lisbon live, whether he ever cared about Jane at all or just enjoyed having something to poke. All of it is right there, being offered, and Jane says no. Because what the show is telling you in that moment is that the mythology was never yours. It belonged to Jane. It was his obsession, and it only ever existed to be the thing eating him alive, and the second that obsession gets fed, the story is finished, whether or not you personally got anything out of 6 years of watching. That's the trade the finale makes. 6 seasons of promises cashed in for one man's revenge, and the show is genuinely fine with it. And that's the real answer to why this ending still makes people angry more than a decade later. The Mentalist didn't ruin Red John by making him a sheriff. It ruined him by building a monster out of things it never explained, and then handing Jane the one ending where nobody ever has to. Because in the end, the show cared about the hand over the mouth. It never really cared who was underneath it. Want more videos on The Mentalist? There's another one on screen right now. Go check it out.